Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to recommend some cozy, wintry books to warm your cold heart. Cozy winter books, not just Christmassy books, but like books that could get you through the cold months of January and February as well. So to me, a book is wintry when it feels cozy and fairy tale-esque, but there are also a few books on this list that are kind of an exception to that and are kind of different, so we'll just hop into it. When I was making this list, I came to the conclusion that I really love books that have a very wintry feel, but I also haven't read that many that have a very wintry feel, so this video is also going to include my TBR for books that I still plan on reading, hopefully this winter, so there are still some other books that could give you some ideas of books that are wintry but that I just haven't read yet, so I can't tell you if they're good or not, but at least they will be on your radar. Also, I just wanted to say, I know that like sweater vests are really in right now, and I was like, should I buy a new sweater vest just because it's trendy, even though I love it? Here's a little hack for you. I just dug up from my wardrobe those old sleeveless blouses that were very in style 5 years ago in the summer, and I just wear them on a turtleneck and it looks like a Gillette or a sweater vest, but it's just a 2015 summer blouse. Why buy new stuff when you can recycle? Anyway, let's get into the books. The first one that I want to recommend, by the way, I don't have the books with me right now. I couldn't find the time to film during the daylight when I was still in my student accommodation, so I'm filming at my parents' house, but I don't have the books here. The first book that I want to talk about is Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik, because she is the queen of writing autumnal or wintry books. This book is based on Eastern European folklore, and I always associate Eastern Europe and Russia with winter, even though I know that there's very hot summers there. Even though the only times that I've been there was in the summer, but oh well. Anyway, this book is basically just about two women ruling countries and trying to not get it destroyed by men. But a little bit more nuanced. We follow Princess Irina, I think is her name. She has to marry the Tsar, who just so kind of little inconveniently happens to be possessed by a demon. The usual, you know. And then we also follow Miriam, who is a moneylender, and she gets the attention of a winter king who kind of wants to use her abilities. And then we also follow two perspectives of two children from a very poor family, and their stories kind of intertwine. It's very beautiful. I would highly recommend it if you love those kind of fairy tale-esque stories that feel like a folklore tale. If you're okay with kind of slow starts, but that you can eventually completely disappear into. The reason that this is so wintry is because the entire story takes place during winter, and there's just snow everywhere. There's a lot of ice, there's a lot of snow, there's a lot of cold, so perfect for winter. Next book. Then another book that I really want to recommend is the Winter Night trilogy. Now, you may know that I read The Bear and the Nightingale, the first book, and I didn't absolutely love it, but I still really want to recommend it because I know a lot of people really love this book. So I just want to kind of give an explanation so you can kind of decide for yourself whether you think you're gonna love this book or not. The Winter Night trilogy is inspired by Russian folklore, and there are a lot of these little creatures in there that are from Russian folklore, and our main character, she can see these creatures from folklore, whereas the other people can't, and it's kind of this journey about how she is going to try to save winter. She's going to try to save these creatures from basically being destroyed because the nature in the surroundings is being destroyed. It's very, very atmospheric. A lot of the beauty from this book comes from the writing style and just the vibes, the general vibes. I think you would really enjoy this if you don't mind very slow storytelling where you follow a bunch of different characters shortly. And this book also features kind of the trope of the main character who has to marry and do all these girly things, but she doesn't want to. She just wants to be by herself, doing the things that the men do. I'm personally kind of tired of seeing that trope. Like, I've seen it done so many times already that I was kind of bored with it in this book. But if you think that you won't mind that, then I think you might like this book. Then the next book or collection of stories that I really want to recommend is Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales. Some well-known ones by Hans Christian Andersen are The Little Mermaid, The Snow Queen, very wintry, and The Ugly Duckling, Thumbelina, but there are many more. For example, The Nightingale is actually my favorite fairy tale by him, and it's not a very well-known one, but it's just my favorite. So that's fun about like reading these fairy tale compilations, is that you're probably going to discover a story that you maybe hadn't heard before that you actually really love. You know, you can just read one every day before you go to bed. I don't know why, but fairy tales make me think of Christmas. They make me think of sitting at home, you know, with a little cozy blanket because it's cold outside. Maybe you still have like a collection of fairy tales from anyone or folklore standing on your bookshelf because you bought it once because it looked really pretty but you never got around to reading it. I'd recommend reading that this winter. And in the spirit of fairy tales, a book that I would recommend reading is The Nutcracker by E.T.A. Hoffmann. To me, the story of The Nutcracker is like, it's the winter Christmas story because I kind of grew up on the Barbie rendition of it. I also love the classical pieces by Tchaikovsky. I mean, you're hearing it in the background right now probably. So if you do like kind of associate the Nutcracker with Christmas and winter, I think it would be a fun idea to just read the original book. It's really short. I listened to it on audiobook and it's just nice to have read it. And then I have a few books that are kind of in a different vein than the books that I mentioned so far, that are not at all fairy tale-esque, but that I somehow associate with winter, and that is classic dystopian. I feel like winter, you know, especially if you're on Christmas break, that's kind of the moment where you can be like, okay, now I'm on break, I'm not tired every day from working or studying, I can now, you know, like sit down and think about the government. So the three classic dystopians that I would recommend are 1984, Brave New World, and A Clockwork Orange. Just to briefly go over all of them, I would recommend 1984 if you want to read a story specifically about authoritarianism, anti-authoritarianism, and about the value of thinking for yourself and learning how to think critically. I think it's the most classic dystopian story that you can read, and it's also, out of the three, kind of the most thrilling and action-packed. I would recommend Brave New World if you really want to read about a story where it's more about the dangers of consumerism and entertainment, and it kind of explores the complete destroyment of any kind of negative feeling. And then A Clockwork Orange. This one's a bit different because the way it's written is kind of jarring because it's full of made-up slang, so you kind of have to get used to it, but once you're used to it, it actually really adds like a different dimension to the book. But this one is more about the exploration of violence, whereas Brave New World in 1984 are more about different authoritarian structures and different ways critical thinking can be dampened. Clockwork Orange is more of an ethical exploration of bad and violent behavior and how that interacts with freedom. So those are my recommendations for good dystopians. Then you can have something to talk about on Christmas dinner, you know, you can just like bring it up, be like, oh hey, hello, all my family and friends. What do you think about authoritarianism? Let's have a fun conversation. And then the book that I want to recommend is to reread the Grisha trilogy. The Grisha trilogy is a staple here on YouTube, and it is inspired by Russia. So we have a very wintry feeling fantasy setting. I don't know if I would necessarily recommend these books if you haven't read them yet. I think it's a little bit outdated and a little bit teenagery. I think the Grisha trilogy is a great book to get into YA fantasy, but if you already read a lot of YA books or just fantasy in general, I think it's gonna be a little bit disappointing. But if, like me, the Grisha trilogy was one of your first like fantasy books that you really loved, then I'd highly recommend rereading them, because the TV show is gonna come out somewhere next year, and I really want to reread the trilogy before the TV show comes out. So if I'm gonna read them at some point, I think it's gonna be in the winter. Okay, and those are all the books that I would recommend. Now let's get into books that are kind of on my TBR that I think would be fun for you to know, because I think they're also very wintry. The first one, and kind of like the biggest one on my TBR, is just any book by Matt Haig. Recently he came out with The Midnight Library, which was hugely popular. I think it's about the Midnight Library is like a place you go to after you die. It's a beautiful story that also covers a lot of things about mental health, and I heard a lot of people raving about this, and it just feels, I don't know why, feels like it could be kind of nice, those like cozy but kind of sad wintry books. But also Matt Haig is known for his Christmas books. They are called, let me look this up, A Boy Called Christmas, The Girl Who Saved Christmas, and Father Christmas and Me, which are just kind of short middle grade books that are Christmas themed, which sounds absolutely fantastic. Like, middle grade is something that fits Christmas to me. I don't know really why, it's just like fun and cozy and quick. I noticed that my library has all of these 3 books, so I think I'm gonna read these. And I heard a lot of people rave about these books, so if you're looking for a Christmas book, I think Matt Haig is your guy. And then some other books. If you follow me on Instagram, you already know this because I recently posted a picture of books that I want to finish before the end of the year. The first one is The Watchmaker of Filigree Street. I actually asked this book 2 years ago for Christmas and I still haven't read it, but it takes place in Victoria? It doesn't take place in Victoria. It takes place in Victorian era London, and there's a magical watch involved for some reason. Victorian era stories feel wintry to me. I have absolutely no idea where that association comes from. Please let me know if anyone agrees with me. So I feel like this is going to be a book that I'm going to be reading in the winter. And then the last one is going to be The Night Circus, which I still haven't read, I know, but the circus and the magicalness, that's not a word, is it? Anyway, the circus and the magic of it all. Everyone talks about like the beautiful fairy tale-esque writing. That to me really fits the winter vibe. So I really hope I can finish The Night Circus somewhere this winter. This video is not very long, I'm aware. So if you have any more recommendations, please leave them in the comments so you can recommend some books to each other. If you enjoyed this video, then give it a like and maybe subscribe if you want to, and follow me on my social media, where I've been posting a lot more pictures on Instagram, which has been a lot of fun. So you can follow me at @thebookleo. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you soon in another one. Goodbye.